Hey everyone, happy Saturday. Welcome back to my channel, Holy Humanist. This live stream was actually an hour later than it was meant to be. I had a little time mix up, so apologies for that. So today we have a very special guest. I actually was interviewed by him and went on his channel a couple of weeks ago now, just kind of give my story as an ex-Muslim. But he's very knowledgeable about religion in general, and there's some extremely good content on the YouTube channel as well. So what I did think is that it would be amazing to host him here and kind of just have a discussion on Islam and various aspects of it from the perspective of somebody who isn't an ex-Muslim. So yeah, I'd like to introduce Cease from Axioms on Trial. Hello, Cease. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
No worries at all. What I will do first is just quickly share your channel. This is Axioms on Trial, guys. There's some very, very interesting videos here. I mean, I just listened to it in my spare time as well, and I learned so much from you guys. So yeah, everybody, please go and subscribe. There's some really, really interesting discussions. You definitely won't regret it. But yeah, so welcome, Cease. If you just want to give us a little introduction about yourself, your channel, and then we can go into your own kind of story and your background some more.
Sure. I guess a little bit about myself. I am finishing up my master's degree in philosophy. So I'm trying to complete my thesis, and I'm hoping to be done in the next couple of months. And then I'll have my master's. So that's pretty exciting.
Oh.
I'm bilingual. Philosophy has been part of my life since I can remember. My father used to teach philosophy, so it's always kind of runs in my blood. So it's always been what I knew that I was going to do pretty much my whole life. And I became particularly interested in religion when I was around 15 or 16, and started reading, first particularly interested in Christianity because that was more of the religion that I was around, and then Islam because of kind of the special role that I think it's taking in the world right now, and kind of looking at the arguments on both sides of the conversation. I mean, I didn't start out in a religious household, but I also wasn't necessarily like an atheist. Like, I didn't really think about it much until I started to think about it. And I started comparing and contrasting the arguments, and then came to my own conclusions. And aside from that, I love meeting people. I love playing music. I've been playing piano for like probably 15, 16 years.
Oh, wow. And
I
you
like
said you're
doing art.
bilingual. Sorry, what's the other language you speak?
So I'm originally from Italy. So
Okay.
my first language is Italian, and English is my second language. But I've been in this country for longer than I lived there. So the US, that is. But I still try to speak Italian every day and write in Italian as much as I can. To not forget my mother language.
Nice, yeah.
But yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a really, really nice introduction. And do you just want to give a quick breakdown of what your Axioms on Trial is all about, and what the mission is there, or what you guys are trying to achieve?
Sure. What we're trying to do is we're trying to analyze beliefs. We're trying to analyze, people's ideologies, whether religious or political or otherwise. I mean, most of our content so far has been focused primarily on religion. I think in the future it will expand more to philosophy in general, because I think where primarily more of my interests lie. But we've talked to ex-Muslims like yourself. We've talked to current Muslims. We've talked to Christians, ex-Christians. We're trying to kind of engage with all kinds of people with all kinds of beliefs. And I do try to find common ground with people who see the world differently than I do. I think there are certain circumstances where that's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
And when that's the case, it's unfortunate, but I think it's important to explain why that is. And I think for myself, I am troubled a lot by the kind of narrative about Islam on all sides of the conversation.
Right.
And so yes, it's true that I was never a Muslim. I don't speak or read Arabic, but I don't need to.
Exactly.
I know what these books are saying, and when people say, well, you don't speak, you don't read it, how do you know? It's like, okay, well then you as a Muslim tell me what you think, what you believe, how you interpret the text, and then we can have that conversation. Like, I mean, that's one thing is, and this is true, I think, for Christianity as well. The label Christian or the label Muslim or the label anything doesn't mean anything to me, because people ultimately interpret these things vastly differently.
Yeah.
So, and we'll get to some of the talking points that I've heard from Muslims soon. But so for me, it's like I just want to know what it is that the individual believes their religion is saying, and address it on that individual level.
Yeah.
And then we can look at the polls that have been run as to what percentage of the Muslim world believes X, Y, or Z. And then if one Muslim says, oh, well, that's not really the Islam that I believe in, great. But I am particularly concerned by, how many people do believe those things and what effect are those beliefs having on the world. And, I reject the narrative that criticizing religion, in this case, Islam, makes you an Islamophobic. And that is something that we hear also in the West. People on the left who, again, I am, I think in most contexts, a liberal. At least, on the left side of the politics conversation.
Yeah.
And yet I see people on the same side, out of white guilt or out of guilt of past imperialism and all those kind of things, be too afraid to speak out, not realizing that what they're doing is taking the voice away from secular Muslims living in the wherever, actually.
Yeah.
And why, out of kind of a racism of low expectation, a fear of, they have no problem calling out sexism in their culture.
Yeah.
But the moment that it exists elsewhere, then they can't comment because somehow that's wrong.
Yeah, and that's maybe just their way of doing things. Exactly, will come across as bigoted, and we shouldn't. But you're letting really bad things slide, right? Which people are actually unaware of.
Yeah, it's cowardice, and it's being more focused on how they look.
Yeah.
Than the actual suffering of people over the world. So, but my channel is basically trying to shed light on ideas and finding the strengths and weaknesses of those ideas and holding people accountable, trying to bring people on the channel who are willing to engage and respectfully, but at the same time putting pressure on their ideas to see whether or not they can defend them.
Yeah. Yeah, and just on that, I mean, we're going to get into it in a bit as well. I'll ask you about it properly. But do you get that from, like, when you are confronted with Muslims based on the back of some of these videos, when you're actually talking about Islam or criticizing Islam, do you get Muslims try and use that trope that, well, you're never part of Islam or part of it, like you don't know? Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you a little story here.
Yeah, go for it.
I think I've told this on my channel before, but I don't think I've told you before. Tell me if I have. But when I was in college, well, I'm still in college, but several years ago, there was a talk given at my university about Islamophobia and the role of media in the way in which people, have this picture of Muslims in the world, and how the media is in many ways toxic and contributes to certain bigotry towards Muslims in the United States. And I made a comment at the end of the like in the Q&A session of the talk, and this is exactly what I said. I said, anywhere that there is bigotry against any group, Muslim or otherwise, that is a real problem that we have to tackle honestly and call out. Like, I've never denied the fact that there are people who are bigoted against Muslims, who are Islamophobic.
Genuinely, yeah.
But the problem is that a lot of Muslims and even people outside of Islam are using this label of Islamophobic and Islamophobia to actually silence people who are not Islamophobic, but who have valid criticisms of the ideologies that are presented, and to shut down conversation because they're not equipped to have the conversation. They're too dishonest to have the conversation. They want to shut it down by saying, "Oh, you're just a racist," or "You're just," which of course doesn't make sense in the context of religion, because it's not racist, it's the belief system.
Exactly.
But it's also just a way to kind of deflect the real problems.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, I see a lot of dishonesty on all sides. Like, I'm not singling out Islam. Like, I've met plenty of Christian apologists that are as dishonest.
Yeah.
The difference is that you have a lesser amount of fundamentalists, because Christianity has gone through a reformation that Islam has not gone through.
Yeah.
Which means that I might encounter a lot of dishonesty on Christianity's side, but I'm not going to get death threats. Pretty much all the death threats that I've received have been from Muslims.
Surprise, surprise! The religion of peace sending you all those lovely death threats.
Right. So on one hand, one side of their mouth, they're claiming that Islam is a religion of peace, and on the other, saying, if you insult my faith, you deserve to die.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways. Now, likely, the Muslims that I've had on my channel have actually been more honest in that.
Right.
Like, one Muslim that I had a conversation with didn't say that Islam is a religion of peace. He said Islam is a religion of many things. It can be a religion of peace, but it's a religion of war when it has to. So at least I felt like that was a refreshing level of honesty that I haven't seen in a while.
Yeah.
Then, of course, they went on to say things like, if a girl has her period, then she's mature enough to get married.
Yeah.
Including 9-year-old girls.
Yeah.
And while at the same time trying to claim that Islam and science are compatible. And it's like, no, what we know about brain development and biology and what makes somebody mature enough to even be able to give consent is not what your religion says it is.
It's not just dependent
and that's
on
where
you reaching the age of menstruation at all.
Right.
There's cognitive, there's so many things there. Yeah.
And I see a lot of Muslims in these conversations really do backflips where you point to the verses that talk about a woman's testimony being worth half that of a man's. You point to, for every verse that says something positive about womanhood, you have 10 that say something negative.
Yeah.
And they can't, they don't want to admit this. It just really, it's so apparent that they're lying.
Yeah, it's very dishonest. And this is the crazy thing. So this is why, like, I always bang on about this, but the way on your channel where you take those Islamic videos completely as they are and then kind of break it down, because this is what they're telling the majority of like normal moderate Muslims, let's say, who are listening to this, and they kind of feed into the lies. So you can't see beyond if the person on the TV, if the imam or the Islamic scholar is saying, oh, Islam is the most feminist religion, or, you know, Islam gives women rights and safeguards and protects our women. That's the only narrative they're being fed. And then you're like, hold up, if you just show them their own source, that's completely contradictory. But all you have for your thing of information is like this it's almost propaganda, right? It's just
it's not almost, it's 100, that's what it is. It's exactly propaganda. And the thing is, when the people that have left the faith and are giving their testimony as to, I wasn't empowered as a woman, I had my rights stripped away, my humanity stripped away, then the narrative is, well, you're just a hateful infidel,
you never really were a Muslim, or you've got family issues and trauma, and it's got nothing to do with Islam. You know, you're just using Islam as a scapegoat for your
it's pure gaslighting and dishonesty. And so, you know, like a lot of the things that I've seen, heard, and read Muslims say about science are completely detached from reality. And yet they say these things in the most arrogant, like they're, you know, experts in the matter. And like there are a few pretty big channels on YouTube that, you know, come out with series talking about science and talking about philosophy. And it's like, you guys understand less about these topics than a freshman year in college taking a 101 intro course to any of these issues. And yet they're talking like they're, you know, holders of PhDs, which there's also, you know, a lot of people that have degrees that don't know anything. But you know, in this case, it's even worse than that.
And I feel like sometimes they actually have to work backwards, you know, when it comes to Islam and science, especially now, because science is, the trajectory is just moving fast at such a it's moving forward at such a rapid rate that now it's almost like, how can we go back to the scripture and like really clutch at straws to make this just fit in with the current worldview? Like, it's almost like they're having to see actual science now and then kind of go back to the scripture, because now you just can't assert that the Quran has any science in it. If by that logic, then Prophet Muhammad and his first companions would have been, you know, some of the greatest and first real scientists on earth.
And that's what they claim. That's what they say. But, and yet, when you looked at closer, they get things about science wrong all the time, from basic biology. And then when you bring these things up, they want to try to sort of evade and say, no, this really means this other thing. Well, how do you know that's what it meant when Muslims were preaching something else just a few years ago? For example,
and it's this vagueness. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
It's because I feel like this vagueness as well works in their favor, right? Because they can latch onto something, but then they can also backtrack from the claim and say, no, this doesn't apply. Like exactly what you were saying. They can, because of the vagueness of it and its openness to interpretation, they can use the out of context, not the right meaning argument for anything you put forward.
And people can do that with anything. Like this goes back to their talking point that the Quran has never changed. The Quran has always been changing because everybody's interpretation of it is different. Also, like, you know, what you mentioned when you were on, I guess, on my channel, and also when Infinite Noodle was on, pointing to the fact that there have been things added later, mistranslated. I mean, the Arabic was written differently at one point without the dots, like you brought. But what you're saying now, it's like, for example, when in the context of the Big Bang, the Muslims love to hold on to this word expansion. Like that word encapsulates the entirety of the scientific theory. And it doesn't. It's one word that can be interpreted in a number of different ways that doesn't really tell you anything about the actual theory and its details. And so it's just this constant pretending like the two things are not in opposition. And then it's just, you know, the Muslims of this kind strawman science all the time.
Yeah.
And like, I forget what the guy's name. I think his name may be Sabor or something. But he's a frequent member of one of the pretty big Muslim channels on YouTube. And he was having a conversation with T-Jump. And I was literally cringing watching this conversation, seeing this person talk with authority, not understanding the difference between philosophical naturalism and methodological naturalism. And both perspectives have to do with science. They're not just one. And this guy didn't seem to understand this, even though T-Jump, I don't know if you know who T-Jump is.
No, I actually haven't heard of him, but I will check it out after this.
Yeah, I'll send you some links. But he kept trying to explain to this guy, like, they're both dealing with science. And they're not, one is just using a methodology to talk about what it is that we can know so far. And another is making metaphysical claims about the nature of reality as it is.
Yeah.
The two things are not synonymous, and you're conflating them. But when somebody is dishonest, when somebody's not actually interested in truth, it doesn't matter what evidence you bring to them. It goes in one ear and comes out the other. And that is Definitely. What I have noticed. Like you asked me before we did the show to go over some of the conversations that I've had about Islam on my channel or on other channels. The last few videos I've done have been breaking down this conversation that I had on a separate show, where my brother, who's a physicist, and myself had a conversation about the validity of the kalam argument, which is something that a lot of Muslims like to use. And multiple times in this conversation, the panel of Muslims we engaged with were forced to change their arguments, change their terminology. Before, it was from causes to explanations, which are not synonymous neither in science or philosophy. Then it was in the context of logic, with the idea that logic is innate as opposed to presupposed, which are also not synonymous concepts. They were completely exposed at every step of the way in this conversation, and yet went on social media after the conversation claiming victory. Saying things like, they'd gotten the atheists to admit the first premise of the kalam and all this stuff. And it's just embarrassing. And yet their followers eat it up because they're not really interested in learning the reality of these concepts. They're playing for a team. They've already decided they know what is true. So they're going to support whatever bullshit comes out of the people who think they're on their side.
Just like them, yeah.
Yeah.
They're not interested in actually comprehending whether that argument even, is a good argument in itself, or if the person is being logical or rational, or they're actually, like you said, they're just there to play for that team. Right. There was a debate today as well between Haris Sultan and Daniel Hakikachu, and you can see in the comments as well, like the brigade of Muslims are just ready, but he's literally barely even said a few sentences, and you realize that there's nothing substantial in these points he's making. Like, it starts off with a false equivalence, but they're already like, oh, Daniel demolished Haris, like he's taken him down. No, he really hasn't. But you're not here to actually, be a fair judge of that. You're just here to cheerlead.
That is what brainwashing is. It's like being capable of looking at sort of the arguments objectively. I mean, I think it's hard for everybody to be pure. I don't think any of us are purely objective, but I think those that have intellectual honesty make an effort to try to find the validity of these arguments and challenge themselves and challenge one's own ideas and intuitions and assumptions. Like, I can point to what sort of things I find convincing, partially because it is my intuition, but then I try to move away from that and say, well, okay, well, do these intuitions,
can I rationalize?
Is there more? Well, is there, is there more that I can use that actually can bring validity to these things, or am I just trying to, what's what I'm looking for, rationalize something that I can't actually defend intellectually.
Yeah, so you're always looking to substantiate it, right?
Right.
In the best way. Sorry, I just wanted to give a quick shout out. Yeah, Siraj Kamal, thank you so much for your super chat. And I'm really glad you're enjoying the video so far. And John Hinkle as well, thank you so much. Sorry, I know that was a bit earlier, but I didn't want to break the flow of the conversation. But yeah, I have received them. Thank you so much, guys. And sorry, if we can just back up a little bit, because we're getting like really into the nitty gritty of the stuff, where I just want to know if your first ever, like your first exposure to Islam and your first kind of encounter with it, which made you think, okay, hold on, let me like kind of look into this more. What are these claims saying, and why it was interesting to you? Can we just touch on that real quick?
Yeah, now actually I realized I forgot to finish my story, so I'll go back to that in a second.
Okay.
I think, it was once I decided that I wanted to understand religious beliefs of all kinds and to see their validity and to see their impact that we're having in the world. I started to look at the situation in the Middle East.
Right.
I started to look at different causes, political and religious, that contributed to something like 9/11. I think The End of Faith, who's a book, which is a book by Sam Harris, who a lot of people really criticize, but I do think he has some valid points to make. That was influential. And then just engaging with people who say that they're of faith, whether it was in the Muslim tradition or the Christian one.
So had you kind of had encounters with Muslims and kind of learned about their faith firstly through your encounters with them before you actually looked into like what it is that Islam, is
in the context of Islam, it was more the other way around. First, I learned about Islam on a more academic level.
Okay.
Like watching debates, reading what Muslim believed, but it wasn't so much like I didn't have a lot of personal experience, as opposed to Christianity, which I knew a lot more Christians. But then, so this kind of brings me back to the story I was telling you before.
Yeah.
My university had that panel, that conversation, and I made that comment. They basically, what I said was like I said, we have to fight bigotry wherever we find it, but I'm concerned about the term Islamophobia because it's being used to silence people who are being honestly critical of religion and not bigoted. And then they advertised that my university had a group to learn about Islam, open to people of all faiths.
Right.
And so I showed up.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they were being genuine. Like, I don't think that they expected anybody, especially someone like myself, who looks the way that I do, to show up. And I didn't go there in a threatening way. I showed up. I was friendly. I double checked to make sure that, that they, we're okay with having people who didn't belong to the culture, who want to learn about the culture.
Yeah.
And I get woken up by a phone call about 3 days later saying that I'd been reported by these Muslims to campus police as being a threat to them. And so it's ironic because in doing what they did, they proved my point, right? Which is anybody that they find to not be agreeable to their propaganda, they want to shut down as a threat. They want to shut down as a racist. They want to shut down as Islamophobic. And so I talked to the detective and I said, look, this is what happened. This is what I said. This is what is going on. They're proving my point. And, I'm not somebody who's ever going to be silenced by any kind of maneuver of that kind, any threat. That kind of stuff doesn't bug me at all.
Yeah. Nice.
And so once they realized that that was not going to go well. They tried to set up a meeting with the president of the club, who was actually apologetic and was trying to say that it was a misunderstanding. And I understand them being insensitive because, like I said, there is a real bigotry out there. But this wasn't that. This was a very calculated maneuver to not really engage in the conversations. The president claimed that they were not there at the time the comments were made, despite the fact that I knew that they were. I remember very well them being there. So they were trying to kind of wash their hands of the whole affair. Like, oh, well, I can't really comment because I wasn't there. You're just lying to my face right now. Because I know you were. I saw you. And I was partially looking in your direction. Like I was, I have a fairly decent memory as far as faces are concerned.
Yeah.
And so, ultimately, it didn't spiral any worse from that. But it was just a testament to the fact that, this is how toxic the conversation is.
Yeah.
And so primarily my experience of Muslims has been one of evading from the reality of your books.
Right.
Well
said. Yeah.
Making lies about, expressing lies about science, lies about the history of, like what I hear often is that a lot of the violence we see towards women, well, that's culture. That's not Islam. Ignoring the fact that Islam is so embedded in the culture.
Yes.
The people who are engaging in these things are quoting culture, or quoting scripture.
Yeah.
And so, it's...
And it's really easy to pass the buck, right? And just say it's culture. So it's got nothing to do with religion, which is what genuinely, again, it's just as simple as like so many people just don't know what's written in their scriptures. I'll be honest, even when I was a Muslim, I didn't really know like the full deep depths of what was in the Quran. And I'm sure in a lot of households, especially for like my parents' generation, especially because it's in Arabic, if it's not your first language, beyond the classes you go to, it does kind of end up on the bookshelf, like obviously on the highest shelf and the nicest cloth and covering, but it kind of, it's just there as this almost like mysterious book that you have this whole ritual around, and you can't even, like open it without having cleansed yourself and done everything you need to it's not like if I went down and casually said, oh, this is what the Quran says, or this is the punishment in Sharia for like adultery, that they would just happen to know that and then know that the sanction for these things actually comes from the Quran. It's just, they've just taken those little fragments of what they know, meshed it together. And like you were saying, then it becomes a battle almost on an individual level to say, what are your views? What's your Islam? Like, what's your interpretation of this? So it's really interesting that you've obviously like had this kind of experience and then being shut down at that university. Somebody wrote in the comments about your story, I think it's relating to your story. Doorknobhead says, it was a misunderstanding. We didn't mean to release our thugs so early. That's probably what they were thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, there's nothing more sad than watching Muslim women defend the inequality and arguing against their own rights. Like, I don't care what people wear. Like, if you want to wear a burqa and you want to cover yourself up, that's fine. But what is doing that consensually mean in the context of a culture that shames you and demeans you and threatens you if you don't cover up?
Yeah.
Where does the idea of having to cover up in the first place come from?
Yeah.
I think it's clear that when you look at those concepts, there's an inherent sexism and victim blaming inherent in that kind of mandate that they want to ignore. And it's just delusion.
Yeah. And it's internalized to a point now where it's almost like, well, yeah, it's for our own protection, it's empowering because we're protected and we're seen as being so valuable. And it's like, no, that all of those things putting you down to that level is stemming from a place of pure inequality. That's where, I mean, it's even just like Muhammad and his wives. And if you like look in, the whole facade of this perfect man falls apart when you examine his personal life, right? It's you
he was a warlord, and he was a rapist, and he was a pedophile.
yeah
Like that
yeah
to me is as clear as anything.
yeah
And as far as, how do I say this? The value that they're finding in claiming that, covering up is just an example of how valuable we are. It just purity culture. There's nothing more toxic. It's not that you have inherent value. So you have value in the context that we give it to you, and if you don't abide by these rules, then you're disgusting and you're not worth anything, and we can do what we want with you.
And the kind of analogies that they give, honestly, like it's ridiculous. Sometimes we're lollipops, and wearing a hijab is like a covered lollipop, and if you're not, you're uncovered and you attract flies. Was reducing the men to flies as well. I don't know why they give that example, but recently the Taliban they were having a little conference, and they were comparing women to watermelons. And it's just, there's just constantly like these equating us to, like, I don't know what's next, but every other week or month it just changes. But the more you hear them talk, it's even obvious as a woman listening to them that this is all about, it all stems from a place where men are in charge, men are dictating things just to keep the status quo for themselves. Like, Islam is a great religion for men. I will have to say that. Like, if you are a man that's not interested in pursuing, any, like, a life where you actually use your mind and you question and you pursue truth and value, and you want to learn things and immerse yourself in the world, if you want to switch off, follow a rule book and have unlimited amounts of sex in this life and in heaven, Islam is a great religion for men, and obviously, like, at the expense of women. But yeah, so again, like you said, it's very, like, some of the worst things are when I see women really, like, believing it when they look you in the eye and say Muhammad was the first feminist, and, like,
I mean, it's completely. I mean, that is pure propaganda. I do want to say, though, on that point, that because of what I think will lead to flourishing and what leads to well-being, I don't think that the values of men who want to live that kind of life are actually engaging in what is ultimately beneficial to their own well-being long term. So I don't think that Islam is ultimately beneficial to men either. Yes, if the man wants to have that kind of life, they might see it that way. But I think, from my perspective, they're actually doing themselves harm and not realizing it.
They're definitely, I mean, doing themselves a disservice. Yeah, for sure.
I look at religion ultimately as a real cancer, because of the way it operates and blinds people to actually engaging with reality in an honest way.
Yeah.
So
particularly, I mean, do you think Islam has more of a problem with this? Because, for example, in Islam, it's so frowned upon to, like, actually question. This is why I think Islam is extremely cancerous, is because it just, any ability or for you to question or think is just shut down instantly. It's actually said to you that this is bad, like this is almost the devil coming in and kind of like, it's eating into your iman, which is like your faith and your love for God. The fact that you're having thoughts which are natural human thoughts, to be like, okay, well, where did God come from then, and how long has he been around, and how did Noah get all those animals on the ark, like how did the kangaroos get there, how did the you can't, you're just told to just stop it, just that's the devil, and it just stumps critical thought, and it actually just stops brain development, which is why we see, like, the whole attention and focus is turned to, like you said, pursuing Muhammad as a warlord, like expanding this religion and pursuing the most basic, like, carnal pleasures that are the booty of it, for lack of a better word. But yeah, what I did want to ask you is when you first, obviously, you said you studied Islam academically before a little bit before you had more encounters with Muslims. What was your very first impression when you read the Quran or you looked into Islamic sources?
Well, one thing I do want to just say that, obviously, I agree with everything you just said about the kind of dogmatic way of thinking where critical thinking is suppressed. But I don't think that that is special to Islam. I think that is a core of all religion. I met many Christians who were told the same thing. But again, I think it's more widespread in Islam because they are more fundamentalist in Islam. And again, we often hear this kind of talking point that the problem isn't religion, but the extremist. Well, to me, it's not true. I think the problem with fundamentalism are the fundamentals.
Totally.
With a real religional piece like Jainism, the more extreme you get as a Jain, truly the less damage you do in the world.
Yeah,
truly
the more
peaceful. That's not the case for these other religions. Why? Because their fundamentals at the core are broken, are inhuman, are immoral. Now, as far as your other question, my experience of reading the Quran, was similar to my experience of reading the Bible, although probably a little bit worse, because I do think that ultimately Jesus and Muhammad are different characters. Now, I don't buy this whole kind of rosy picture of Christianity that Jesus was like this wonderful person. Like, I actually find the New Testament to be fairly disgusting as well. But he wasn't a warlord. So
he never killed anybody. Like that's a starting point, isn't it? He never killed anyone.
My reaction was pretty basic. I was just appalled, and amazed that in the the 21st century people actually believe this nonsense. And I look at religion as kind of like a time capsule. Like when I look at what is going on in the Middle East, to me it's like what it would be like to travel back in time to the 7th century. It's like a portal to the inhumanity and destructiveness of the time. And it's amazing to me that in today's day and age, we still have to deal with that kind of barbarism.
And it's actually a testament to itself about why morality is evolving and needs to change and move, because it's such a rigid structure, right? Like you said, it's a time capsule. And those things just don't work anymore. You can't be in 2021 and be calling for people to be stoned or thrown off the highest point of buildings. It's just it's not where we stand as a species anymore. But just to touch on something we were just talking about, just to go back to it for a second, how we were saying that religion obviously ultimately does close off your thinking and suppress critical thinking. So Islam is obviously great at doing that. And what I was trying to explain is because it's actually it's even there in the scripture. Like the Quran itself says that, God says, don't concern yourself with matters that are beyond your understanding. They're just for God to know, especially with concerning matters of the soul and relating to what happens with the soul after death and stuff like that. Does in Christianity, is it written anywhere that these are doubts are inspired by Satan kind of thing, or is that kind of emphasis put on it? Is that
you find? I mean, I'm not great at thinking of quotes off the top of my head. I leave that more to the co-host that I do the show with. Is much better at that. But there are. I mean, the entire metaphor of the snake in the Garden of Eden is that the snake is the one that's bringing knowledge and kind of perverting God's creation. So there is at the core a distrust of knowledge.
True.
Now, you find all these books are self-contradictory.
Yeah.
You find passages that talk about, you know, Jesus being the truth and the way, and then you find passages that, you know, suggest that, you know, we're to not have doubts, and then there are other parts where doubt is encouraged and parts where it's denounced.
Yeah.
And you know, it's
And just also just while we're on the topic of the Bible for a bit, what's your opinion of like the Islamic view that this is like the so basically that the fact that the Bible and the Torah were corrupted and Islam is like the perfect final compilation of that message, but you guys have suddenly got it all wrong and the Jews have got it all wrong, and this is the perfected word of God.
It's laughable because much of the Quran is plagiarized from these other books.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Islam is actually incoherent ultimately, because it's trying to say that all these other religions are true in a sense. Like, yeah, Jesus really was a prophet and all this stuff, but then they want to deny what Jesus actually claimed, which is,
and also make extraordinary claims like he's been taken up and he's gonna, you know, return and
right. So yeah, obviously, look, anybody can make claims. I'm interested in what the evidence is.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if your evidence is that you can't imagine the Quran being written by people because you think it's so amazing,
yeah,
to me, it's like, well, you haven't looked at literature then, if you find that impressive. There's nothing to be surprised or impressive about any of these books. For me, I see that there are, I think, very obviously man-made and written by men living in barbaric times.
Mm-hmm.
We have, like you said, we have some videos about why prophecy, for example, is a terrible argument,
Mm-hmm.
and why, you know, this talk about miracles and all these things are, you know, just claims that can't be justified.
Yeah.
They want it to be true, and so they claim that it is.
Mm-hmm.
I see nothing miraculous about, for example, one of the talking points is that there are certain things found in the Quran that they couldn't have known if not for a miracle.
Yeah.
And then you actually look at the history and you know that there were cultures that knew those things before the Quran, before Islam was a thing. They borrowed those information from these other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
it's
when
just
you were reading
ignorance.
the Quran, yeah, exactly. Sorry to cut you off there.
No worries.
I was just so intrigued about. So when you were reading the Quran as well, were these bits that you could tell, like, oh, this is completely just a knockoff of Christianity, or they've taken this story? Because obviously there's so many stories, right, which are essentially we've got like all of this. We claim all the prophets that came from all the Abrahamic faiths before as our own as well, and so the stories are all similar. But did you read it in the Quran and think this is just a worse retelling of that story? With like...
Absolutely, I saw the Quran as a worse knockoff of other religions, and as clearly man-made, as immoral and sexist, and you know, and just the worst that you know, human culture has created.
Yeah. Because I read it in English as well, like obviously because I don't speak Arabic, so I can read it and I can write it, but I can just speak a bit of the modern language. But the classical Arabic of the Quran, there was no way I'd ever be able to understand that. So when I actually started to read it in English, I tried a number of times, so I think I really like tried to get to grips with it when I was about 16. And even like in English, I was expecting to be mind blown. But I was just like, it doesn't even hold your attention. It was so jumbled and enigmatic. And then a story's being told, and then suddenly we're cursing out the disbelievers and saying how they're going to burn in hell. And then it actually like took me on a wild goose chase, because I was actually into history as well. The Quran talks about Zulkarnain, which is, they say that it's referring to Alexander the Great, and how you can claim he was a Muslim, I don't know. But okay, so there was that whole thing, and then King Solomon and how he could talk to animals, and he was talking to an army of ants, and then the Queen of Sheba. I went to do like my independent research on the Queen of Sheba, because the whole Islamic story was that, I don't know, she was like half jinn or something, and her throne was moved to Solomon's palace in the blink of an eye, with all these jinns that helped him because he could talk to beyond this realm and all that. So I watched documentary after documentary of like, who is the Queen of Sheba historically, like what lands did she rule over, was it present day Yemen and like all of Abyssinia? And it sent me on such a wild goose chase, because the details and the fragmented bits of stories that I was getting, or information I'd get from Islam, chucked in with the mystical, and it had an element of the supernatural, and there was no way for me to like find any real period in history or some woman or corroborate the story. So you know what I mean, like the book itself wasn't very, like you said, if a piece of literature is better than that any day, at least it flows, there's style linguistically. You actually physically cannot read the Quran without going back to the tafsirs and being like, what battle is God referring to here? Like you're saying, the books are self-contradictory. Like the numbers of how many angels helped them in a war will change within the Quran itself. So how you can claim this is a miracle and divine is just absolutely beyond me. But it's a circular reasoning, right? So you can't falsify what they're saying. Yeah, sorry, did you want to say anything on that?
No, just like more what you're saying, that this claim that the Quran is this perfect, amazing thing, it's just more propaganda. Like there's nothing impressive about it. And also that, it's funny when people say, well, you don't speak Arabic, you don't read Arabic, so how would you know? It's like, so you're telling me that you're perfect, all-powerful God, that the only way that they could communicate to the world is in this one way, that
in the Qureshi dialect of Arabic, that's not
I mean, and just so clearly ludicrous. And ultimately the translations are what they are, right? It's not like the translation is going to be so wildly different. And the thing is, I've talked to people who do speak and read Arabic, and they believe the same shit. Right? They believe the same horrible stuff. So it's, it doesn't matter. Like it's
and now I just say as well, because that argument used to, I think the not being able to speak Arabic argument also is one that Muslim, like when I was a Muslim, they would obviously, if I was trying to engage with a topic of discussion that was maybe just not sitting right with me, it would always be the two ways to keep you in is go and speak to a scholar because they know best, but also you don't know Arabic, so you would never know the real interpretation of this. So first of all, if I'm never going to know, then what's the point of God sending this down as like an eternal universal message?
If that's the case, then your God is a weakling. Like the only way for him to communicate is through the words of flawed humans. Then you're admitting that your religion is just weak.
So, and your God couldn't even foresee that there's people who don't understand this and won't and will have problems with it. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to give a shout out. Amit Dawari, thank you so much for your super chat. And thank you for subscribing as well. And Doorknob Head, thank you so much. And also for your really nice words in your comment. Yeah, thank you guys. Sorry, Cease, did you want to continue with what you were saying, or should I pick up next? Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on miracles for a second. You did mention that. But by the way, now I understand why your channel goes into some of the topics you do so well, like given your degree and what you're studying, it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so how do you see, obviously, that just in general, like speaking for all religions, if you like, but the miracle claims that religions rely on, for example, like, Muhammad flying on a winged horse and him splitting the moon, and for people actually in 2021, like if a Muslim was to come on your channel and say, yeah, he did split the moon, what do you think? It's just how can these miracle claims still be used by people as in, we all know the ramifications of if the moon was split right now. If the moon was to split, it would be a freaking massive universal phenomenon, right? Like the tides, everything would be just fucked. Not as we know it. So the suspension of nature that they basically are claiming happened once upon a time ago, a long time ago. I know Christianity makes a lot of miraculous claims for itself, right? Jesus and the lepers and all of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's simple. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Anybody can claim anything happened.
Yeah.
What is your evidence? And if your evidence says this book says so, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to me. We know that people have had, faulty perceptions of phenomena. That happens all the time. It's well recorded. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I know anything is impossible. Like, I'm fine with the idea of acknowledging that any one thing could somehow happen, and if God exists, he could change laws of nature the way that they wish and change them back, whatever. I care about, what is a Muslim's methodology to move the imaginary and the potential and the, possible into the actual. You want to tell me that the moon was split? You want to tell me that Jesus resurrected? You want to tell me that Muhammad? What is it that he flew on a winged horse? Is that the story?
Yeah, Barak, the actual name of the animal is. Yeah.
Okay. Even if we were to say that, as a matter of principle, because I can't be certain of anything, it could be a possibility. That doesn't bring you any closer to have that claim be valid. Like, you need to show me something concrete that shows that those claims aren't just possibly true, but that we have examples that we can observe empirically to actually show that these things actually have happened before. They can provide that. All they can provide is what the books are saying happened, which isn't evidence that they happened. That is why the scientific method is the only thing that brings us to any possible knowledge, because it is able to make novel predictions. It's able to actually observe things in nature and connect the possible to the actual in a way that faith and the stories and cannot. So
no, definitely completely agree with that, and that's why the scientific method is so crucial. And it's just, obviously it's sad because I was talking about the situation in Pakistan as well, and just the leaps forward we should be making in education there. It's science is literally being lapped in with these general studies, and the Islamic madrasas are becoming official schools, and it's this is just from the root, the grassroots of society. You're just indoctrinating people with the belief that stuff like this can just happen, and it's all true because that one book says so. And the rest of your reasoning, your like you said, bringing it into the actual, none of that is going to be set in their mind from the get-go. These are things they're going to have to unlearn or relearn, or or live in a state of cognitive dissonance, like what most moderate Muslims are doing today. That you have to. And for me, that was the easiest reason to leave Islam. I said to myself, I could either lie to myself every day just to stay in it and be comfortable, or you follow where your mind's at and where your mind is going, because that way you can be true to yourself in every single way. But you can't be a Muslim and then deny something like the Prophet carrying out a miracle, because then are you a true believer? You're not. So you have to stand by it. And it does, I'm sure, when people who are educated and their education has meant something, when you say that to yourself, you have to either just let a couple of neurons, something has to slide and give way for you to fully accept that. But that was it for me. I could not live with cognitive dissonance. It's just so liberating to not have to try and piece together the pieces of the puzzle that God didn't bother to do for you because he doesn't exist. But what I wanted to also ask you, actually, or somebody asked if I'm taking live calls, not at the moment, not for the format of this conversation, but we will be taking questions for Cease. So yeah, feel free to jot down any questions you have in the chat, and we will get them answered if Cease is happy to do that.
Yeah, real quick. Axioms on Trial is not on Twitter yet, but I will probably be making a page later this week. We are on Facebook, and we have Patreon and YouTube. And it's patreon.com/axioms on Trial, youtube.com/axioms on Trial, and then Facebook, also Axioms on Trial there. But yeah, I will be setting up a Twitter this week probably.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, because I was trying to tag you on Twitter, and then I realized, yeah, there was no handle for that. But yeah, awesome. So yeah, another question, Cease. This is one I really wanted to ask you. So obviously you criticize dogma, like in general, you criticize religion. And so when you, like in this journey and generally, like the religious apologists you've encountered, whether it be on the Christian side or the Islamic side or whichever side you're dealing with, do you think that all religious apologists are as bad as each other, or do you notice slightly more mental gymnastics with one group over another?
I think that's an interesting question. There are some progressive Christians who I think, although they really have to, I think, ignore the reality of their books to say some of what they're saying, some of their approach, in kind of a more metaphorical sense, I think is interesting. And while obviously I still find their culture and beliefs ultimately ridiculous, I think they're at least trying to do something more intellectual there.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm yet to meet a Muslim that I've been able to really respect intellectually.
Wow.
I think
Ain't that the truth?
And I mean, I think that's true for Christianity as well. I think it's not easy to find people who I think are being really what's the word I'm looking for? Self-analytical in the things that they believe. But I've met a couple. But generally, I think apologists in general on all sides of the religious spectrum are pretty bad. It's both philosophically and scientifically I just find them to be a joke.
Yeah. And so when you do step back, you're just like, how have they gotten away with this for so long? But like, I mean, like it's just like your followers will at some point just, because if your brain switched off to that level, it is like you're talking to a flock of sheep, right? Until you see somebody cut through the BS and be like, actually, that didn't quite make sense, or that's actually, that doesn't work, or that's actually not what the scripture says.
But it takes a certain kind of person, like you were talking about yourself, like you couldn't deal with the cognitive dissonance. Like there was something in you that made you more intellectually honest than a lot of other people. There are some people who are not driven by desire to know the truth, but are driven by wishful thinking, that are driven by fear of the unknown, or fear of death, or fear of the chaos that one might feel is this life without that crutch. So, it's fear of hell. It takes a certain kind of person to kind of look at those things, step back, and be capable of looking at life as it is, and be honest about that condition, human condition.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's why religion has such a stronghold, right, for people, because it can easily take any one of those things and like use that to to manipulate you into feeling more closely, like associated with the religion of, especially Islam. It's kind of like carrot and stick. It's very like fear and guilt, fear and guilt, fear and guilt, like death, afterlife. And I don't think any religion or organized religion that I'm aware of goes to the extent that Islam does, and that it forces you literally 5 times a day to constantly like grapple with this fact. And like there's 5 potential times in the day where you could completely kick yourself because you feel so guilty for missing a prayer, and that's like cumulatively building up because it's so encroaching on your daily, like on just a normal day of your life. And the story goes that it was going to be over 100 prayers or something. I can't remember the exact number, but Muhammad actually was negotiating with God to reduce the number of prayers because he was Moses. I think it was Moses was saying to him that your people won't be able to do that many. I know them. And then Muhammad had this back and forth negotiation with God, and it went down from like 100 or something to 50, and then 5 as we have it today. But yeah, so again, it's guilt and fear, and it gives people hope. And obviously there's a bunch of reasons why religion for any kind is so appealing. But again, it could be so simple as to like, there's probably so many people out there who think like me. I know my friends, like people around me, they have a very similar moral compass to myself. The only difference is I've actually read the scripture, so I don't have to like play that game of, oh, this is our culture and this is just more backward here because education hasn't kept up. Like I can just make that leap and say, actually, it's problematic from the get-go. Like the Quran itself has established like, that this equivalence, and this is our starting point. So yeah, it's just a mess really. But what was I going to ask you? Yeah, just because we have the Abrahamic theme going, what do you think is the biggest myth that exists in the Abrahamic religions, or just the biggest? I guess the biggest. It could be the biggest myth, the biggest flaw, or the biggest issue. But what do you think is unique to the Abrahamic faiths that is extremely problematic?
I think that is definitely a question that I would have to think about more in depth. I don't know that there are. I mean, like I said, to me it's all myth. To me it's all mythology. So I'm not sure that I would necessarily say that one aspect is more so than the other. I think the totality of these ideologies are, it's just life denying, repressive, and something to be left in the Middle Ages. I will say that culturally, the biggest myth that I recognize is this idea that we need religion to be moral, which is complete nonsense. Like, at best, religion borrows from already existing moral intuitions, and then adds other rules to it that I think are immoral. But religion is not the source of morality.
Yeah.
At best, it borrows from it. So it's really the other way around.
And it's scary to think that without religion, you would just have no morality whatsoever. Like there's nothing innate within you,
Yeah, and I think most people are not like that, but those who are, at that point, it's not even really morality. It's you're doing it to get into heaven, or because you're told to do it. Like you're not actually moved by genuine empathy or what I would consider moral traits there. I think a lot of people are comfortable talking about concepts that they're not educated in. Anybody that claims you can't have morality outside of religion needs to shut up, pick up a book, go back to school, take an introduction to ethics course, and just educate yourself. We live in an information age. People are capable of looking up this stuff on their own and expanding their their awareness, and they often don't do that because they have a narrative that they keep repeating to themselves that they're comfortable with, that they don't want to question. So
okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. And just generally speaking, do you think that, like, you mentioned earlier that Christianity has obviously gone through a reformation that Islam is yet to go through, so it's like still kind of obviously as the last like revealed religion from that part of the world. Do you think now we're at a stage where, like you said, in the age of information, and this is also why I want to thank you actually for engaging with ex-Muslims as well, because we're kind of all on the same, like our end goal is clearly the same. But do you think that the internet is now capable of doing or having an impact enough as to make Islam kind of either have to really calm down its its expansionist political agenda that it kind of inherently built into it? Do you think that the internet could be the transformation that Islam needs?
I think the problem is that the internet can function both ways. It can function as a tool for information and knowledge and truth and expanding one's mind. It can also function as, another avenue for propaganda and
Confirmation
nonsense,
bias.
confirmation
Yeah.
bias, and all. So the people who are dogmatic are just going to find what they already think is going to agree with their beliefs and just confirm them. And it really, I think it's hard to say, and it's hard to necessarily be hopeful when you see a lot of the things going on in the Middle East. And but I think it can work both ways. I think when you're looking at it historically and globally, I do think that we've made progress. There's still a long, long way to go. And I think if there's one thing that history teaches us, is that those in power are not able to keep that power indefinitely.
Yeah.
At some point, one way or another, there is a collapse.
Yeah. Every empire that rises falls, right? Yeah.
And by the way, am I frozen? Because
yes, your camera is, but I can hear you still.
Okay, give me 1 second. I think I'm having some computer issues. But anyway,
no worries. And people, if you have any questions for Cease, like you can start popping them in the question box.
If I freeze here, I'll be back in a minute. But as long as you can still hear me, maybe you can take me off the screen, but I can still talk. Yeah,
sure.
But yeah, I would just say that I'm depending on the day. I try to be hopeful and think that things are getting better, and that those who want to hold people down will not be able to indefinitely.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good. But yeah, like you said, and people are saying in the comments as well, it's very true. Like the internet can turn information into misinformation as well. But again, like the pros and cons. I think for people now who do have doubts or answers that they're just not satisfied with when they kind of turn to family or friends and then get pushed towards going to meet the scholars and they're still not satisfied with answers. I think just having the internet at your fingertips and being able to hear opinions that you normally wouldn't necessarily tolerate is definitely a good thing. The fact that you can, there's going to be a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of confirmation bias you could come face to face with, and then you like you said, your beliefs could just be reinforced constantly. But the fact that there's also a space for the complete opposite to happen, I think, is brilliant. And then you have people who are clearly ex-Muslims, and they're it's not like they're saying something which is completely whack to you. Like if an ex-Muslim says something about the Quran or about a source, like we'll go back to the source and we can actually show you. Like that's what happened in my experience when I was having doubts and then didn't want to believe the reality of the situation. I wouldn't just believe it because, some ex-Muslim is saying that, Islam is so bad. But the second that they've put up a Quran verse and I've read it and I've come to my own judgment on it, there's no going back from that. Like, you can't argue with the Quran itself. You either like it or you lump it. And I decided to lump it.
I think I'm back now. I think it's working.
I think you are back. Yeah, let's get you on. Yeah, I think that's good now. Okay, so I think I've covered all the questions I wanted to ask you, Cease. Did you have any final comments before we check if there's any questions?
No, I was just going to answer actually a couple of these questions that I just saw in the comment section. One was, what do I think about Zakir Naik? I think is how do you?
Yeah, the medical doctor Zakir
Naik.
He's an idiot.
He's a complete embarrassment on every level. Like, and that's what I mean. Like the fact that people hold individuals like that as a resource or as expertise on anything is just embarrassing. These are complete morons. Or
you talk about like the 101 classes. Like he didn't even know. Like he couldn't even understand the concept that evolution is just a theory. That's what he keeps saying.
Yeah, these are people that
scientific theories. Yeah,
they have no place talking about these things. They're nobodies that don't understand anything about science and philosophy. They're given respect.
They're getting called a medical doctor, evading tax, getting asylum.
As far as the other question, let's say he mentioned about Christians, Muslims not wanting to think about what they believe, but humans by nature are lazy thinkers. So is religion taking advantage of that? Yeah, I would say so. I think obviously we see that in other contexts too, like politics. But yeah, I think religion takes advantage of the insecurity of people in order to control their behavior.
Also, sorry, I just wanted to add that religion, yeah, you're right. Like, it does serve to the lazy nature of humans very well because you're given like a ready-made system, right? You're given a framework, you're given the guidebook or your guide to life essentially, and you've just got to tick all the boxes and then you're on the track to heaven. So I think, it definitely does take advantage of that. Sorry, Cease, were you saying something or?
No.
Okay. Any other questions, guys, for Cease? I'm just reading some of the comments, sorry.
Okay.
There was a debate today with the one I mentioned, so if people are just talking about that. But
I'm planning on watching that later too.
Yeah, and again, they were just saying like Daniel Hakikachu had a tough job because Islam it's very tough to defend. And Apostate Prophet was just like firing questions at the end as well, where which are complete yes or no. Like, do you deny this or do you agree with like sex slavery? Treating the disbelievers are like the worst of creatures, and marrying a 6-year-old to a 54-year-old or whatever. And he would just flip it. But again, like it is a very hard. I would not envy his position at all to defend that kind of stuff. In this day and age, is very hard. So I understand why he would take the route when he'd answer the question. He would never answer it with the straight up like yes or no, acknowledging the question. He'd do a roundabout way of somebody brought up the fact that like if in Islam, if a woman refuses to give her husband sex, he could effectively like discipline her for being disobedient, and he couldn't say whether that was allowed or not. And so he went to how, Islam defines the rights within a marriage and men have to provide shelter and food and this, and therefore
answer the question.
Yeah, exactly. And he's gone on this roundabout thing. And then he goes, so then the women also have certain obligations. So yeah, if she isn't really, keeping with her obligations, then they could be recommended to go to the scholar who would tell her that, no, just say yes or no. Just answer the goddamn question. But they don't. But yeah, it was a very hard position to defend. Just seeing if we have any other questions. Apostate Prophet's hilarious. Yeah, that was really funny. Cease, let me know what you think of Daniel Hakikachu's evasiveness when you do get a chance to watch it.
I'm sure that Mike and I will probably do a review of that conversation as a
Yeah. Oh
future
my.
episode.
Yeah. That would be so good because again, like I'm saying, just some of the false equivalences to begin with is because his basically his starting point, like his worldview is just colonialism, and like it's all this hate channel towards like America and the West, and basically what I think is like misguided revenge that he's trying to take out on America and the West. No different from like when Osama bin Laden felt like he was wronged and then like really wanted to take revenge on the Kafir West. But yeah, he will literally, like today, Daniel Hagikuchu straight up said things like like sex slavery was mandated back then because it was a normal thing in the time of like men and the power of like military and needing to like engage in war and stuff, and now we have modern weaponry, so like that's the same thing as that's why sex slavery was okay back then, and it just doesn't make sense. And
That makes sense.
yeah, the starting points were all really, really off. I'm trying to remember. Oh, I've just watched the whole thing um and then came onto this, and I'm trying to remember some of the other stuff he said because it was fresh in my mind. But you'll see it. You'll see the false equivalences and
Sure.
the fact that like colonialism was such a big feature of this, and that the discussion was human rights. And like he's talking about a time that was before like that the UN was fully established and like human rights were a thing, and we moved away from the barbarity associated with colonialism as well. And he's just saying that that's like one of the biggest ills of society, and therefore we need Sharia. Like it's just and the whole crux of his argument was that Sharia protects and safeguards family and marriage and that unit. And all he was doing was talking about like traditional societies and family, like extended families living together. And he actually mentioned the word co-wife as part of the family unit, which was a huge blunder. But he's basically talking about traditional family settings which existed before Sharia anyway. It's not like Sharia came about and then the family and marital unit suddenly developed as it is and we need to bring that back. Like it's never a thing. But yeah, so it was I think he had a tough time today. It was over 4 hours.
And it's why, like, I'm supposed to respect your beliefs when those are your beliefs.
Mhm.
Like, you think that people are supposed to be subjugated to these roles because you think that's what's good. Like, I have no respect for that kind of ideology, and I'll
Yeah.
criticize it as much as I want. And I don't care about the death threats. I don't care about people getting their feelings hurt. Like, I get my feelings hurt when I see what's going on in the world and how people are being abused because of these immoral delusions.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I love that attitude, because this is the attitude you need, especially when like people like you, again, like Haris Sultan and whoever is willing to engage with these people, because engaging with them is a task in itself. Like even listening to 4 hours of Daniel Hagikuchu's reasoning, I was like, oh, I feel dumb now, like thinking that
He
these are
was
like
he was
good
lucky that
logical
he was able
arguments.
to even have a Muslim engage, because the majority won't, from my experience.
Uh-huh.
The Muslim channels I'm aware of, like the pretty big ones, want to debate. Usually will set up a situation where it's like 4 or 5 of them talking all at once to like one caller.
Yeah.
But they're too cowardly to go on other people's channels and engage, because they want that kind of advantage. They want that kind of like, I'll go anywhere on
Yeah.
any channel with the expectation that you'll come on mine as well. Like when I had the conversation with those Muslims on the one show, I said I'd be happy to come on your show, but you come on mine first,
Yeah.
because I was just on a Muslim channel, and they refused to do it.
Mhm.
Why? Because they know that they are not equipped to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And you'll have a few that will occasionally engage,
Mhm.
but I think for the most part it's actually looked down upon. Like, we're told, they're told not to engage the enemy.
Yeah.
No. So
Yeah, definitely. I honestly don't see them having them even thinking that they have any incentive to do that, even from a defensive point of view, to defend the Islamic narrative that maybe you're talking out against. But also, yeah, I've seen some of your videos with the Muslims, and it's just like that attitude is exactly what you need to do, because again, you're in control, right? And you can say this is the point of discussion here. You can't beat around the bush and kind of like flip it. But again, like people who are willing to take them on and have discussions, because at some point you're like, okay, what's the value of this conversation with this person? You're saying, well, if they can't even understand the basic concepts or the differences or the nuances in the point that you were saying, when the guy wouldn't understand the two scientific approaches even to philosophy, and you're like, that's a major part of the tool of the conversation that you're missing. So this person's going to go round and round and round, and you're going to be there trying to discuss concepts that are even beyond their understanding, and they're just there with one goal, is to defend. And when you say things like, I mean, I was, even as an ex-Muslim, like, I still, when I say the words Muhammad was a pedophile, I have a bit of apprehension saying that, because that's going to be like that's going to cut them deep. That's a very big thing to say. It's, nobody wants the prophet or the man that they revere to be associated with that. It's heinous, it's abhorrent, and I even can't say it as casually as you, and the fact that you have these claims and you put them in a situation on your channel where they have to defend that. And then they come up with all the same usual apologetics: people mature faster, puberty, whatever. Just doesn't hold up.
The thing for me is, I'll say as well, two quick things, because I see Apostate Prophet in the chat there.
Oh yes, yeah. Hi, Apostate Prophet. Thank you so much for the super chat and for stopping by, and for your amazing input in the debate today. It was brilliant.
Apostate Prophet, I would love to have you on my channel at some point. I've been wanting to talk with you for a while now, so maybe we can find a way to get together sometime in the near future, because I think that would be an interesting conversation.
That would be really cool.
That aside, what I want to say is that I think a lot of people on YouTube and social media are afraid to have these conversations, because they're afraid of the mob mentality, of having their channels shut down by sort of dishonest Muslim reporting of their videos, of having death threats, or having their livelihood in danger. I don't care. Like, if my channel gets shut down tomorrow, I'll make another one, and I'll keep making another one, and I'll start from scratch for the rest of my life to get the things that I believe in out there. And obviously, I want to live, but I want to live a life. I'm not going to live a life scared to speak my mind. So death threats don't bother me. Aside from the fact that I don't take them seriously. But even if I was to, it wouldn't change anything. I'm going to say what I think. I'm going to criticize your ideology the way that I see fit. And if you want to defend yourself, you're welcome to come on and engage me. Otherwise, it's your problem, not mine.
Yeah. And actually, just on that point, I wanted to just ask you, obviously, you're in the US. What has your... and obviously you don't take some of these death threats and stuff seriously, but in general, what's the response you get from Muslims who you do, in whichever capacity, engage with in the US? Or what's just kind of, can you just give us a little indication of what's the situation there, in terms of being a Muslim in the US and then having people like you maybe challenge or confront their views? But I'm not really aware of the US experience, American Muslim experience.
Well, like I said, I mean, person, they won't talk to me. So outside of that situation I told you about at the university, I think they're just not looking to engage. They're looking for their safe space, and that's it. Online, it's been a mixture of the Muslims that have come on, as horrendous as their ideologies have been. At least I think I was lucky enough to get slightly more honest Muslims than some of what we see on generally on YouTube. So I do appreciate that aspect of it. Um, outside from that, like I said, it's just been death threats and name calling and attempts to get my videos flagged or my channel demonetized and that kind of thing. Which again, I'm not doing this for the money.
Yeah.
Like I'm hoping to make money from it, and uh, that would be a good thing. But that's not my intention. It's not my goal. My goal is to actually change minds or bring certain concepts and facts to light.
Yeah. And that's why, again, like I said, that your channel and the conversations that you guys have are just, well, they're stimulating in general. But to listen to a discussion where, you guys are criticizing Islam or the dogma within it, but also doing that specifically through like a philosophical lens, or discussing like the landscape of moral philosophy and then where Islam fits within that. Like, these are just really, really interesting conversations, because I've seen some comments as well where Muslims are like, well, this like really, really made me think, or this video is like that, this was a question that's just, you don't get satisfactory answers from telling you when they do send you off to the clerics and the imam. You don't get answers that literally sit right and your brain can comprehend in a way that when you listen to conversations on what you guys are saying, or the principles and stuff, that just makes so much more sense. And even if your channel or somebody watching or listening to one of your videos, if you can, it's literally just planting the first seed of doubt, right?
Right.
And when you discuss these concepts that like blow concepts out of the water, such as like free will and determinism or whatever the Quran is saying that God proclaims, and then you guys are discussing the complete opposite, somebody who is genuinely already on your channel, they're actually curious, and they want to learn, because they're already there. They're either there to defend their viewpoint and be like, oh, what they're talking is complete crap, or they're there because they're like, oh, genuinely they're addressing this really niche topic. But it is all about planting that first seed. That's why I'm saying, like, we're all on the same page here, where this momentum that people should just think and, first of all, tolerate ideas that are different from theirs, which is why I think it's really weird that the university campus experience that you had, like, it almost seems like when they were inviting people from whichever background or belief or no belief, it was just performative lip service, really.
Oh,
They
100% was. They didn't expect somebody to actually show up. It was 100%
yeah,
performable.
they really didn't expect anyone to take them up on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially not you.
Right.
Yeah. So again, those people, they're happy in their state, but there are a lot of people. So I've been getting messages from actually a lot of like British um, Muslim girls who are like, I've had some serious concerns about like things relating specifically to women. Um, and you're just, it's those tiny little things that like you see they struggle with, and then a couple of months later they're like, oh, I still struggle with that, but like I'm not at the point where I can disregard it all. But then something else happens, and then they put two and two together, and it just triggers a lot more questioning within them. So even like those small little snippets of just putting an idea in someone's head, that's, like you said, a lot of the time, if the evidence is contrary, it goes in one ear and out the other. But somebody who's genuinely looking to see the truth, and I mean, in this day and age, hopefully, even like listening to people like you, even this conversation we're having, is just pushing people to actually consider that and tolerate it. And it's like Ricky Gervais says, right? It's 2021 now, and we still have blasphemy laws. Like, what's the next person going to be incarcerated for? Like saying that they don't believe in unicorns or something. It's getting that farcical now. So countering it and countering any dogma or ideology that you think is problematic is inherently your right. And like, yeah, I literally love your attitude to towards it. But yeah, I think that's about it from my side. I don't know if we have any other questions here, but I have taken up an hour and a half of your time. But yeah, did you have anything else to say? Otherwise, I can just do
No,
the closing remarks.
I just want to say thanks again for having me on and coming on my channel last time. I love what you're doing, and I think, like you said, it's so important to find people who are willing to share their voice and their experiences and to challenge these ideas that I think are really cancerous to the well-being of anybody in the world. So I have a lot of respect for anybody like yourself that is willing to kind of step up and do their part in that. And I definitely hope that we can do this again, and maybe you can come back on my channel and vice versa. And hopefully Mike can join me next time. We can talk
that would be
again.
cool.
But I'm glad that, I feel very grateful that in doing this, just like starting the channel and things, that I've gotten the chance to meet so many awesome people like yourself, and kind of getting to know your experience. So thank you.
That's honestly so that's one of the benefits as well. You just connect with so many like-minded people. You end up having like fascinating conversations you never thought you'd be having. This is like, it's like nearly 12 o'clock midnight here, but like this is just like, I've had an awesome evening, because if this is genuinely like I said, this is why cognitive dissonance is so not required in life, because you feel so good, when you're just speaking your truth, you're staying true to what you believe in. You're like, if I can positively be of value or help somebody claim back their life or their truth, and especially if this is the only one we have. But yeah, I really appreciate everything you've said, and likewise for what you're doing. Like mad respect. And like I said, I binge your videos quite a lot, and I always feel like I've learned something. So thank you so much as well for coming on here. Thanks everyone for watching us. Please do check out Axioms on Trial, and Axioms, Cease, do let us know when you get your Twitter up and running as well.
Sure.
And we can connect there. And thank you guys for this super chat. And thank you so much to AP for stopping by. That was really cool. But yeah, I think that's it. Cease, all good from your side?
All good.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
All right. Thanks everyone. Bye. Good night.
Bye.
Bye, Cease. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.